These players are both coming in at 4-1, Paul. So a very good start to kick things off for their tournament. And they're looking to continue that trend in the hands of Louis Samuel Deltour. Well, he's got a little bit of a twist on the Rogues deck. It looks like he took the two kind of versions that you see and kind of mashed them together.
Yeah, so there have been kind of two popular versions of Rogues that people have been playing as of late. One is the version with a bunch of flying rogues, right? You have the robber, you just have a lot of aggressive creatures, and then you're trying to curve into Xerath with Brazen Borrowers. And then there's the other version that's playing Ruin Crab and trying to turbo mill you out, and then basically get 7 to 8 cards in your graveyard as quickly as possible to kind of turn on all your payoff cards. Louis has a little bit of both. So he's got the crabs, but he also has the Xerath, recognizing that it's an extremely important card to have against all these big green creature decks where oftentimes after sideboarded matches, especially, people bring in big escape cards, and you need something a little bit stronger than Cling to Dust in a lot of situations to be able to deal with those cards, and Xerath is the perfect card for that.
And there it is, Ruin Crab to kick things off on turn 1 here for Deltour as he passes the turn back to Brad. On mono green, plays a forest, but then nothing doing here on turn 1 or turn 2 as he passes the turn back over to Deltour, who has, well, some options now ahead of him. He's got Fabled Passage to just go for the quickest graveyard filling, but sometimes that can work against you, Paul.
Yeah, so Louis is basically just thinking about whether or not he wants to run out Temple of Deceit here or run out a basic land. If he runs out a basic land, he can basically counter anything Brad can play on turn 3. However, if he runs out the Temple of Deceit, this might be the best opportunity for him to run it out, because in the following few turns, he wants to be able to curve out if he can. Ultimately, I think he decided to go for having the option of Drown in the Loch. I think the card he was most scared of potentially is Trail of Crumbs. But given that Brad Nelson didn't play that on turn 2, you could probably guess that unlikely that he has it in his hand.
That's right. No relevant cards hitting the graveyard just yet there for Brad Nelson, at least none that I could see. And that means that Deltour gets to kind of calmly, coolly, collectively move that game plan forward. You did see the Brazen Borrower come down as Petty Theft to bounce the Elephant. Of course, one of the things that the players really worry about when they see that Kazandu Mammoth hit the battlefield is, of course, the Great Henge, which we see in hand here for Nelson.
And really interesting thing that I want to talk about right there is the fact that Louis chose to bottom into the story, despite having a Ruin Crab online. And
Wow.
will have the ability to put a ton of cards in Brad Nelson's graveyard, perhaps thinking he has plenty of action to work with in his hand and just wants to ensure that he draws that he draws relevant ways to interact with what Brad's trying to do.
Sorry, I'm still just a little offended by the fact that he bottomed that draw 4, and I need to recover here, Paul. Here comes Kazandu Mammoth back on the battlefield now for Nelson, and it's got a friend. Double Trouble, taking advantage of Castle Garenbrig there to add an additional mana for creatures. So 2 Mammoths on the battlefield with the Great Henge in hand, and Deltour's going to have his hands full here if he can't deal with this.
Yeah, I mean, he does have a Xerath here. So, I mean, Brad Nelson has a completely stocked graveyard, and Louis has all kinds of awesome options here to take out of Brad Nelson's graveyard, including, of course, that Feasting Troll King.
And there it is, Xerath getting ninjutsu'd in, if you will, rogue jitsu. I don't know what we call it, but he's taking a good long look at the yard. Oh, he's getting the Great Henge. Remember, Xerath can get any permanent. And he's got his own copy of Great Henge. He says, hey, if you get one, I get one too, all right? Now, this is going to be the cheapest Great Henge you've ever seen here, down to, I believe, just 4 mana for it. So, okay, fine, not the cheapest you've ever seen, but a drastically reduced Great Henge there, and that is going to leave both players with that powerful artifact on the battlefield. And I don't know what's going to happen now. I see. The setup here for Deltour is to use Petty Theft to return it to hand. And now that Brad's effectively tapped out, he won't get any advantage out of it this turn, at least. Well, outside of a couple life.
Right. So now this Brad can float the mana and just run out a Lovestruck Beast here if he wants, but I mean, the damage might have just been done here because now we're looking at Louis with a great henge on the battlefield with multiple creatures in hand.
Boy, Paul, if you would have told me I could cast Gadwick with the Great Henge out, I would have signed up for this deck a long time ago. Look at this. He's going to have to be careful and maybe leverage Gadwick's ability, static ability there, you know, to tap down creatures.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what he's doing here. He's going to run out of Gadwick, and then if he bounces something with the Brazen Borrower, he can then bounce a creature that's in play, tap down the other one, and then steal something else with the Zero.
Wow. Look at this.
Oh, man.
Petty Theft is a blue spell going on the stack that leaves Gadwick's ability up. And here comes Xerath Sand for some more. Boy, we know there's a PC. Oh, is that an Ugin? Is there an Ugin? He
has one Ugin in his deck. Did he mill it?
Yeah, he did. It's on top of the graveyard. And Brad says, okay, you know what? You don't get to steal a 9-mana artifact and then an 8-mana planeswalker from me on back-to-back turns. I'm not going to let it happen. That's not how that's going to go. And that does it for game number 1. We'll be back with more right after this. And welcome back to coverage here at the ZNR Rising Championship. We're in round number 6, game number 1. A landslide for Luis Samuel Deltour. Wow, that was brutal, Paul. You have to figure that that's exactly what he imagined doing when he chose his deck for the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. Xerath Sand is one of the absolute best possible weapons that the rogues deck can have against the mono green food deck. You know, oftentimes, if there are a lot of ways the mono green food deck can kind of outvalue you, especially if they can land the Witch's Oven early or a Trail of Crumbs, get the food stuff going. All of a sudden, you're just way too far ahead on cards. However, if you can just stick a Xerath Sand at some point and take one of their big permanents, all of a sudden you kind of swing the game back in your favor. I think, I mean, it is the main reason to play Xerath Sand, and you saw what Louis was able to do there. Now, after sideboard, Brad does have a few extra tools here because he has 3 copies of Chainweb Arachneer to exile whatever the big threats that he has in his graveyard may be, kind of get rid of some of the cards in his yard. Additionally, you're going to see him bring in, of course, the 3 copies of Scavenging Ooze too as well, which does a pretty good job of countering Xerath Sand.
That's right. Yeah, you know, it's not often you get a chance to hit twice with your Zerasan, right? The first one, usually you're getting in with an evasive creature, but the second one is just a 4/4 on the ground, and it can be a lot more difficult. But boy, Louis Samuel, that first game had a chance to get Feasting Troll King, which is kind of the card that you think of when you think of Zerasan hitting the mono green deck, and was able to get something better both times. It's like, what is going on here?
Yeah, and look at the start here again from Louis here. Ruin Crab into land, into Thieves Guild Enforcer.
Very nice for Louis Samuel de Tour. Now, I am curious, Paul. There is a difference. There's that trail of crumbs that you mentioned in the first game that Brad didn't have. This time he's got it.
Yeah.
So how is that going to change how things play out potentially?
Yeah, and additionally, what's really important here is Louis doesn't actually have a payoff card, right? He has managed to find a way to put a bunch of cards into Brad Nelson's graveyard, but that's not necessarily what you want to be doing early if you don't have the payoff card, especially because after sideboarding, Brad does have access to all those escape cards.
Interesting attack here from Louis Samuel. He can attack because he can get Brad to the 8 cards in the graveyard there to make the Thieves Guild Enforcer actually trade off with the Mammoth. But he does need to be careful here because he wants to keep up a removal spell or some way to interact with the Great Henge for this very reason. It's going to hit the battlefield here, and I'm assuming we're going to see Brazen Borrower.
Yeah, you are certainly going to see Petty Theft here in response to the Chainweb Arachnier. So you will not get the trigger. Brad will not be able to draw a card. And you're just going to see basically a lowly 1/2 enter the battlefield here.
Yeah, just a little Chainweb Arachnier.
Now, despite all this, despite what looks like a very strong start from strong start here from Deltour, again, no card draw effects here, no Zereth Sand, and take a look at Brad Nelson's hand. I mean, Louis doesn't have an answer for either of these threats that he has. There's the Great Henge and also Vivian Monster's Advocate in Brad's hand.
That's right. The creatures are roughly trading off for each other on the ground, but if you're in Brad's seat, that's fine. You've got these 2 card advantage engines that you can deploy, and right now, Louis Samuel does not. He's got Heartless Act, so he's going to take out the Kazandu Mammoth with that, potentially stranding the Great Henge in hand here for Brad, as you see it jump up to 8 mana now, and allowing a sizable attack here from the 2 Thieves Guild Enforcers, crashing in for 6. But that's kind of it, right? There's not a whole lot to follow up with.
Yeah. And, you know, I have played this deck a fair amount, and sometimes games like this do happen, right? You're just playing a bunch of cards that try its best to put cards into your opponent's graveyard, but if you can't find those payoff cards, all of a sudden you've spent a lot of cards and a lot of resources to kind of do this thing. But if your opponent just keeps playing threats and you don't have those payoffs, all of a sudden you're just going to be behind.
That's right. Vivian Monster's Advocate's going to come down and make a Reach Beast. There's a Cling to Dust to take care of. I think there was multiple targets that are worth considering there, including a Feasting Troll King or 2, as well as a couple more Chainweb Arachnier. So a little bit overloaded on the graveyard here. I wonder if Louis actually just needs a card.
Yeah, there's just too many creatures that benefit from being in the yard that at this point I think he just wants to look for basically action. Right.
So he's going to target a forest and find a second copy of Brazen Borrower. That could be good here. Oh, and he found Blood Chief's Thirst as well, so he can clear away the creatures and actually kill Vivian.
Yeah, it is extremely difficult. It is extremely difficult for this deck to deal with a Vivian if a player gets 2 activations out of it, because you can simply just make a few reach creatures, then all of a sudden you're Soaring Thought Thieves and all your other creatures just don't do a whole lot.
So there you go. Send the Reach Beast packing. And you see Brad Nelson shake his head. That is not how he wanted this turn to go. He only needed one of those creatures to survive to be able to protect his Vivian, at least for the turn. But they both died, and one of those card advantage or board presence engines that we talked about is now gone.
Yeah, but remember, Brad still has the Chainweb Arachnier in graveyard, so he still has to play this turn. Additionally, he's got a Witch's Oven that he can play this turn as well. So now he has the option. He could even potentially play out a Feasting Troll King out of the graveyard if he wanted to, but I think he might be more inclined to just keep the 4/5 Spider in play and keep up the active Witch's Oven in case Luis might have some kind of removal spell.
Yeah, very tempting. You know, it also represents a big reload for him. If he goes Chainweb Arachnir out of the graveyard, play the Witch's Oven, if he can survive with that Chainweb Arachnir, sacrifice it, and then have the 3 food to sacrifice to the Troll King plus all those triggers from the Trail of Crumbs, it feels like that would be very difficult for Luis Samuel to overcome with Brad at 15 life. But Brad does need to kind of keep everything together here, at least for the turn. From what we can see, it looks okay. I mean, the Extinction event could take care of the Arachnir and lead to 6 more damage, but Brad has kind of infinite Arachnirs here.
Yeah. The issue with the Extinction event
is that it kills the Thieves Guild Enforcers.
Yeah, it just wraths the board. So
right, everything goes. Yeah,
right, and Brad can sacrifice the Arachnir and still be able to cast it again next turn, which would be quite strong. Otherwise, the Exile clause would be very good.
Yeah, I mean, he has 2 more in the yard. In terms of Luis helped him out quite a bit.
Everything.
It's kind of like, what do you want? And you can see part of how Brad Nelson's sideboard plan for this matchup has come to fruition here. There's now 5 cards that he can bring back from the graveyard, and those were all put there by Deltour. So thank you.
Yes, and now Brad's going to have a spectacular turn here, potentially. He could return Feasting Troll King, get 3 triggers off Trail of Crumbs, then also play the Great Henge that he has in his hand for 2 mana.
Whoa, that's a turn. Of course, Feasting Troll King.
Look at those triggers.
Insane. It outclasses anything on the other side. Your best bet is to try to trade off with a Thieves Guild Enforcer. But as we've seen, the Feasting Troll King doesn't stay in the graveyard for long. It will come back most games. And it becomes so difficult when they have Witch's Oven out, because Witch's Oven gets you 2/3 of the way that you need to get it back by sacrificing itself. Right. And of course, with Trail of Crumbs, forget about it.
Yeah, I wonder now, I'm not sure if Brad's played a land. I wonder if he's considering not activating the trail. Because if the Feasting Troll King resolves, he can now play the Great Henge, then play Forest, then play the other Feasting Troll King that he has in hand, thanks to the Castle Garenbring that he has in play.
Wow. Well, it looks like it's going to have to be Drowning the Lock here, hitting the Great Henge. Absolutely. As Deltour can really do nothing else at this point. He just has to stare and watch as Brad Nelson has his way with this board state. Already has Feasting Troll King on the battlefield. Yeah,
the problem here, it just feels like Luis is just a little bit short on threats. He needs to scrap together a few extra ways to kind of push through some damage, because if this game goes on for a few additional turns, Brad's just going to be way too ahead on cards.
That's right. Well, he drew a Ruin Crab, so he'll play that. Now, you do start to wonder how close he's getting to milling out Brad. And remember, there's 2 Brazen Borrowers on Adventure with the 2 Thieves Guild Enforcers on the battlefield. And we may see Deltour switch gears here, Paul, and try to go for the all-in on the mill plan. Really depends on how far he's gotten, because he's going to be under significant pressure here. These Feasting Troll Kings hit very hard. As you can see, he could take 7 here and then another 14 the next turn. The game's over, assuming no block. So Deltour's under a lot of heat here.
Yeah, he could. Yeah, he could try to see if he can string together a mill strategy here. The nice thing is he does have the Extinction event here, and he can call Name Even, which is great. Right, so now he can go end of turn, get a land, mill you for 6, a Brazen Borrower, mill you for an additional 4, then run out Extinction event and Name Even, which would be extremely strong here. I mean, granted, Brad's going to draw a lot of cards here, but at the same time, Brad can only really, quote unquote, save one of his Feasting Troll Kings with that Witch's Oven that's in play.
Right, and interesting to note here as well that we may be to the point in the game where Deltour's like, draw more cards, please. Like, if I'm all in on this plan, there's only so many cards that you can deploy in a turn anyway, so have them all, you know? Seems like a steep hill to climb here for Deltour, but perhaps the only way that he can find victory here in game number 2 may be just to mill out Nelson.
Right. So, I mean, this will allow Luis to get in for 9 damage, right? He's going to play a Brazen Borrower.
True.
Untap,
good point.
Extinction Event, get in for 9, but then it's Brad's turn, and he's going to have a really big turn.
Exactly. Yeah, 9 is not 12, as the philosophers say, but it is a lot closer. Like, one more hit from a Brazen Borrower or something like that, if Brad can't gain a ton of life, could be a thing. But it does seem, again, very difficult. I would be looking at that library size. There's another copy of Extinction Event. This one's going to go immediately on the stack, naming even, and clear the way for a very nice attack. Brad is going to sacrifice one of the Feasting Troll Kings to the oven. That'll produce 2 food. He also has a food at the ready, so he has Feasting Troll King in the graveyard plus the 3 food.
Yeah, and he has
you got in there with the crabs, Paul.
Well, there's no haste creature that he's going to be blocking with, so I guess might as well
send in the message.
It's if you think about it, it's the more efficient play because you just attack with everything instead of clicking individually on 3 creatures.
So he was saving clock.
Yeah, exactly.
Professional play.
So Brad's got a couple of good options here. So he can cast the Arachnier from the graveyard, powered by the Garenbrig to give him an additional source of mana here if he wants. If he does that, he can use that to fight the Brazen Borrower. Then he can also run out a Wicked Wolf to kill one of the Thieves Guild Enforcers that's in play as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. Let's see. He has 6, 7, 8, 9. He has access to what, 10 mana, it looks like, maybe?
Yeah, the Chainweb Arachnier is coming down and killing a Brazen Borrower plus making a blocker is also enticing.
Right, and Brad can even choose to play it even safer here, I think. Let's see, no, he can't. The alternative play is to just play out the Arachnier and then keep some mana up to maybe sacrifice a food to gain some life if you're afraid somehow that one of the Thieves Guild Enforcers might get in. Mm-hmm. Do note that Brad can also return Feasting Troll King from the graveyard as an additional blocker, as he has 3 food in play.
That's right. Yeah, I know it looks bad on the battlefield right now for Brad, but I think he's in a fine position here.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned, I mean, there's also you can also just sacrifice food to gain life. Like, it's not like Deltour's deck is going to, lightning bolt you out of here if you can get to a decent point. And you can see Brad choosing to fight the Ruin Crab here to get it off the battlefield because
wait,
he knows...
Wait, did Brad play a land yet?
I don't believe so, although I'm not 100% sure why. What's going on?
Well, if Luis plays Extinction Event here for even again, that's going to remove the Wicked Wolf and the Feasting Troll King from the battlefield.
You're right.
And then you can attack for 3 for lethal.
No way. Did Deltour just steal this game?
With back-to-back Extinction Events, I think he did.
There's 2 even spelled cards, and Brad Nelson has to scoop him up. Luis Samuel Deltour picks up the victory off of 2 Extinction Events. Wow, did not see that one coming, Paul. I am shocked right now.